I'm starting the recording right now. And Terry, if there's other things you'd like to say, please feel free to go on ahead and do that. And oh dear, I forgot to promote him. My bad. Sorry, Terry. Make him a presenter. How would you like to hear him instead of me? Probably a lot. So there he is.
Okay, can you hear me?
We can hear you just fine.
Very good. Let's see. I am not sure how to advance the slides. Like that. Oh, all right. Very good. So we can go ahead. Thank you very much for coming today and for coming to this session. I have way too many slides. There's probably no way on God's earth I'm going to get through all of them, but that's good. I hope we'll have some discussion, about things that you find that are interesting. So far, I think the session has been really interesting. I went to the last one and was very pleased with it. So anyway, we will go ahead and get started. I can't figure out how to see chat.
For seeing chat, on the right-hand side, there is a purple at the bottom. There's a little purple.
I found it.
Go ahead and toggle that. Yep.
Okay, we're good. Okay, again, you already know who I am, so I won't go into that again. Next, there is a disclaimer. This information does not constitute a legal opinion or advice. You may wish to consult an attorney if you need legal advice. It's meant to be thought-provoking. It is not necessarily meant to be best policy, but it's things you need to think about how many libraries, maybe all libraries in some way or another, are failing some of their clientele. And by watching this, you agree to this disclaimer. There will be quite time at the end of the session, maybe if we have time. Otherwise, during the session, feel free to chime in at any time. I do have chat up, so hopefully I'll notice it. If not, hopefully Amy will yell at me. Don't hesitate to ask anything. Comments are welcome at any point. And if you can use chat, or if you can, I don't know if you've got your microphone available or not. If you do, feel free to do that also. So just any way we can get some discussion going. The truth. This is the truth as I see it. Libraries tend to provide the best services to our traditional populations, people we are used to serving. We provide our best services during our traditional hours and days. We tend to provide our best services to people we consider worthy. What does that mean? That means that people who we think have a legitimate need for being there, job seekers, mothers who have homeschooled children, things like that. We tend to go out of our way to serve those populations. And we tend to provide best services to people that we like. And the people that we like generally are people who are like us, which is a bad thing. It's natural, it's completely normal, but it's not good for a state, federal, local, any agency of government to provide services based on the fact that the people they are serving are like themselves. And that's something we need to watch out for. It's difficult to determine exactly who we serve best, but we make it easiest for people who can drive and who generally have a car. Public transportation in the state of Kentucky is dismal. So we generally make things easy. We have a location, maybe a couple of locations, maybe 3 or 4 locations. But we also need to look where those locations are, because a lot of times those locations are maybe located in more affluent neighborhoods or in places where mobility is not a problem. But we do tend to make it easier for people who can drive. We also make it easier for people who speak English. You know, it's not the first language for a lot of people in the state of Kentucky. And we really should think about that as a problem. We don't necessarily make it easy for people who have impaired mobility. It's much easier now than it used to be. Inside of buildings, of course, you have to comply with ADA. But there are many libraries in the state of Kentucky that are older, that have been grandfathered in, that don't necessarily have parking facilities that are easy for people to use. And that makes it tough on people. We make it easy for people who can come during normal working hours. What are normal working hours? Usually Monday to Friday, some hours on Saturday, maybe some hours on Sunday. Evening, maybe, maybe not. Depends on your library. It depends on how many hours. Are you open on holidays? People are off on holidays. Is the library open? Probably not. Do you want to work on a holiday? Probably not. But still, we are probably failing our people by not having libraries open on holidays and on Sunday and late in the evening and early in the morning. If you open at 9 o'clock, maybe you should think about being open earlier. Maybe you should think about providing programming in the evenings and on weekends. And we'll get more to that later. And I know I'm going fast, but again, we got a lot to cover. And a lot of this is random thought. I've been around for a long time. I've been around since 92, done a lot of jobs. If you heard me earlier, you know a lot of them. Something you may not know is I have a master's in library science. I also have a master's in law. And one of the duties of the public library is to serve all the people of the county. And do we do that? If you don't, you got to figure out why you don't. Is your program, is your children's programming serving all of the people of the county? Are all of your programs located in the library? Do you take them out into the field? Do you do them on weekends? Do you do them in the evenings? Are you making an outreach effort to reach people who might otherwise have a problem? One that's kind of unpopular, but I'm going to mention, do you have a juvenile detention facility? Do you ever do programming there? How about any kind of programming in a hospital if you've got a hospital that has a children's area? These are all kinds of things that you could consider. And I'm not saying you have to do all of them because you probably can't, but it's something you need to think about. And I'm not looking at my audience, but chances are I've just lost about half of you. You probably have already left the session. Not really, hopefully, but anyway. We also serve best people who have a verifiable home address. We serve best people who are over 16 or even 18 because they can sign for a library card. If you can't sign, if you're a child, you have to have a parent that'll come to the library with you in most cases. Not in all cases, but in most cases. That leaves a lot of kids out. What about affording to pay fines? Fines basically penalize people who don't have money, and most kids don't have money. Even if the parents have money, a lot of kids don't have money. So you're penalizing children and you're penalizing adults also who can't afford to pay fines. If I've got $10,000 in the bank, a $5 fine is no big deal. I pay it, I stop at home at Papa John's and go home and have a pizza and watch a movie. If I've got $10 in the bank, I have a choice between taking the pizza home or watching a movie. And so chances are I don't pay my fine and I don't come back to the library. We also serve best people who can readily prove their identity. Not everybody has a driver's license or passport or whatever you require, or can necessarily even furnish a bill that shows where they live. So that can be an issue. Can dress appropriately. What's appropriately? Appropriately legally is virtually impossible to define. But many libraries in the past, not necessarily now, have excluded people from their services, from their building because of inappropriate dress. Legally, you cannot, it's virtually impossible to define inappropriate dress, but it's something to keep in mind. Not that you necessarily have a policy that says that you do that, but do you actually, in fact, do it? If you have somebody come in dressed inappropriately, does a staff member over and nicely tell them that, perhaps they need to turn their shirt inside out or they need to cover up or whatever? That's not necessarily what the library needs to be doing, and it may be discriminating against certain portions of the population. We also tend to serve people who can maintain good hygiene, and that's not everybody. We have people who naturally have a problem with hygiene. There are people who have possibly mental conditions that cause them not to maintain good hygiene. We have people who physiologically have a problem maintaining good hygiene. Do libraries tell people to leave because they smell really bad? Yes, they do. Staff does. It may not be the library's policy, but it still happens. And something you need to watch out for. We serve best people who can understand and conform to rules that are sometimes fairly arbitrary. That is an interesting, certainly, situation. I'll give you an example. One time I was wearing a suit and I was in a public library. I was there for a board meeting in the evening. and my phone rang. It was on silent, and I took it out. It was vibrating. I put it to my ear, and I said in a very slow voice, "Talk," because I knew cell phone usage was not allowed in the library. A staff member came up and grabbed me by the upper arm and escorted me out the front door, telling me that I couldn't use the cell phone in the library. Would they have done the same thing to a kid? Probably. Was it appropriate? No. Was I causing any problems? No. They had a rule and they decided they had to enforce it. Why did they have the rule? Probably because people who use cell phones can get loud. Therefore, the problem is not the use of the cell phone. The problem is that people get loud. They create a policy to address a problem that had already been addressed, and they were enforcing it in a draconian manner. Not really the best thing to do, certainly. That's just an example. We also tend to best serve children that have at least some parental support in their library usage. What I mean by that, the parents have to be willing to come in and sign a card, has to be willing to probably, maybe not, to bring the child to the library, has to encourage the child to use the library, has to be willing to pay the occasional fine. And that's not necessarily all children. One problem there, for instance, children who are in foster care. Foster parents are very unlikely in many cases to let children use the library because they know the child could be moved out of foster care at any time. And I'm speaking statistically nationwide, not necessarily just Kentucky. They know they're likely to be moved out of the home at any time, and they don't want to be liable for the fines for having the books disappear because the child may very well take the books with them totally by accident. So they don't want to have to pay the fine for the fee for the books being lost. So that is a problem with sometimes that you may not even consider. Would your library exempt children in foster care from fines and fees? They do in some states. It's not unheard of. I don't know any libraries in Kentucky that do it, but it would be great if they did. And we also tend to serve people, including children, who are proactive enough to take advantage of what we offer. If they don't know about it, how do they find out about it? And will they make the effort to do it? Do you invite people to take part of your program? Do you invite people to take part of your services? And I mean welcome them, not just put up a sign, and not just put up a sign in English, and not just put up a sign inside the library. There's a lot of things to consider here. People we have difficulty serving. Bookmobile and outreach communities. We have the largest bookmobile fleet in the nation, bookmobile and outreach fleet in the nation, 144 vehicles. Some libraries put strict limitations on who those can serve. Maybe you have to, maybe not. I was on bookmobile for a long time. I was on bookmobile for a couple of years, and I enjoyed it immensely. I also made up totally my own schedule, and I basically served anybody who asked me to come. I did home visits. I did many in a day's time. I had routes. I had a 2-week rotation. There are libraries that won't do that. Maybe you should look at that. Maybe you should look at doing programming off the bookmobile or at bookmobile stops. Maybe you should look at making it more enticing for children to use the bookmobile because they may not be able to get to the library. Does your bookmobile run in the evenings or weekends? Probably not. Yes, that's another. Amy just made a good point. So many kids have parents that work and no one will take them to the library. Most libraries require adult supervision. And that's another thing we're going to talk about here in a bit if we get to it. Hopefully we will, is adult supervision. That is, once again, you're limiting your population. You are discriminating against children. No, you cannot act in loco parentis. That is not within your rights. That's a school can do that. You are not a school. But by not letting little Timmy come into the library and use library books by himself, what are you doing? You putting him back on the street? Are you kicking little Timmy out of the library? Is that the way you want to look at it? I have a real problem with that. Next thing is we have problems serving gay, lesbian, bisexual, and transgender people, and that includes children. People transition very early in I wouldn't say many instances, but in some instances nowadays. And we don't really provide services for them. Sometimes it's hazardous to the community. Libraries are attacked for providing services to this segment of the population, but it's something you need to consider. They need to certainly feel that they are welcome and accepted to come to your programming. I'm not saying you have to do special programming for any particular group, but every group should feel welcome and accepted at your programming. Incarcerated people, including incarcerated children, and it does happen. We don't do very good services for those people. We don't handle it. And sometimes it's because the facility does not want us to. They don't want to be involved with us. People of color, that is another situation. Do you do outreach to minority communities? Do you do things in alternative languages? Do you put notices for people other than people exactly like you or the majority of the library employee? I have no idea what you like, but the majority of library employees, do you put notices of what your programming is in a language that they can understand in a location where they're going to be? Because if you don't, then you are, once again, not providing full services to those people. If anyone wants to say anything or disagree with me, feel free. I usually take disagreement very well. And this is certainly not written in stone, none of this. We also don't serve very well people with disabilities. It's hard to use a library if you're disabled. One time, several years ago, I was in a class, and one of the things we had to do is they put us in a wheelchair, and we had to use the library while in a wheelchair. And then we had to use the bathroom while in a wheelchair in the library. It was incredibly hard. The library was so poorly designed. Yes, it did meet absolute minimum ADA standards, but you know what? It could have done better. And I'm not going to say what library it was, but it was a library with a lot of money. They could have done a lot better. And the bathroom was next to impossible. There were handrails, but they really weren't where you needed them to be. They actually tied our ankles together to make sure we didn't cheat. It was very, very difficult. Can children use your services if they have a disability? If you have a nice story hour pit, is there some way they can utilize it? Or do they have to sit all the way at the back row at the top of the top of the pit? Something to think about. Not everybody with disabilities wants to be stuck on the fringe because that's where it's easy to put them. Poor people who have little money tend to want to use libraries, but are often afraid to. They're afraid to because of fines and fees. Do you charge fees for your programming? Do you charge for materials? That's so sad because you need to be able to provide programming. You need to be able to provide materials for people who don't have the money. You need to not have a mother tell their child they can't come to the library and take part in a craft because they can't afford the $5. Find the money, get the sponsorships. Libraries do that. They do it across the state. Get sponsorships for your programming. Don't turn people away just because they don't have money. Don't get me started on schools, because the way schools do programming, the way they do field trips and stuff, I think is abhorrent. But cater to facilitating people who don't have money being able to use your services. Make them know that they are welcome. Make them know their children are not going to be penalized. Provide the service. Homeless people. There are homeless children. What is homeless? Homeless means that you don't have a permanent address. You may be living in a hotel. You may be living in a car. You may be living in a tent. But is there any reason to deny somebody the ability to come to a event at your library if just because they can't provide an address and don't have a library card? It doesn't matter. You are basing your discrimination against them on a facet that is totally immaterial. They're not going to take anything away. You could say that you have to have an address in order to be checkout materials, and I would even challenge that, but at least there's some rationale there. There is no rationale against letting anybody use your internet. There is no rationale to not let them use books and materials in the library. There is no rationale to not let them attend your programming. Just because you can't prove your address or even prove who you are, who cares? Why do you care? If you can't answer the question, why do we care? First off, do we care? And then why do we care? Then you shouldn't be doing it. And homeless people and deserve services as well as you can provide, the same as everybody else. immigrants. Immigrants are often afraid to use the library. In a lot of countries where people come from, libraries cost money, and sometimes libraries in Kentucky cost money, with fines and fees and things. But you need to let the immigrant population know that it is free, that everyone is welcome. The fact they speak English poorly will not be held against them, that you will try your best. I would love to say that you would have somebody on staff who could speak the second language that's predominant in your community. But with funding, it's probably not going to happen. But you do the best you can do. And you assist people with using your facilities. You don't discriminate. And that includes people with limited English proficiency, who I just hit on. Latchkey children, and that brings up the child in the library without a parent. You are afraid of liability? Maybe you should be afraid of liability. Well, on the second hand, if you kick them out of, Glenda has something. I don't know. Glenda has her hand up, Glenda Highfield. Okay. I am unsure about what to do about that. But anyway, latchkey children. Latchkey children. You're afraid of legal liability. Maybe you're afraid of community reaction. You're afraid of how they're going to behave. So what do you do about latchkey children? And again, I'm kind of puzzled here. If somebody comes in and their parents at work, they came in after school, they're below your minimum age for being in the library, do you kick them out? Do you call the police? Exactly what do you do? Why not have, okay, I see that. But anyway, why don't you provide programming for children who come in after school? Maybe you do. That would be a great thing. But maybe instead of requiring the parents to be there, you give them something to do. Just a suggestion. Maybe I'm not a children's person. I'm sorry. I have never done a child's program in my life, as best I remember. I helped with one years ago. It was a puppet show. It was a lot of fun. But I could be way off base. But perhaps this is something you should consider. And unfortunately, we place obstacles in service to these communities, and it's often unintentionally. Yes, offer in-person homework help. Children don't want to sit around and do nothing. But, if you let them in the library and you don't give them anything to do, you don't let them do anything, they will find something to do. I have, my own kids, my own grandkids, so I know that to be a fact. You just want them to be doing something constructive. We have a Hispanic patron who comes in with his request typed out in English on his cell phone. Since I'm not bilingual, that's the best way for us to communicate. Excellent. There are actually even programs on cell phones that you can get for free that the person can type in their thing in the other language, whatever the language happens to be, hit a button, it'll translate to English. It's not perfect, but it's a lot better than it could be. Make effort to communicate. Make effort to be welcoming. Make effort to be diverse. What the role of the library is not. The libraries do not exist to make money or have large sums of money in the bank, unless you're saving it for a specific purpose. And in fact, the Attorney General said that. The Attorney General of the state of Kentucky said if a library is taking in more money than they're expending, then they need to lower the tax rates. If you're saving up for a roof, it's one thing. If you're saving up just because you like to have a lot of money in the bank, that's not a good thing. And what the point is here, the point is that maybe your library has the money to do more on programming. Maybe the library has the money to buy you an assistant. Maybe the library has the money to provide materials for workshops for free. And directors are going to hate to hear me say this, but it's true. If the library has the funds, or if you can fundraise, if the library does not have the funds, You need to look at these areas. You need to remove barriers. And another barrier, and this is probably going to be popular with some of you, is that libraries do not exist to make a convenient place for staff to work. It should be a nice place. It should be a safe place. But the fact that you can't find people who don't want to work evenings or weekends is not a reason not to provide services on weekend evenings and weekends. You need to do that. You need to provide services when people can take advantages of the services. And there are libraries, and I can tell you this from personal experience, who have opened on Sunday afternoon after church. And they'll do it for a few weeks, and then they'll close because, well, nobody came in. Did you advertise? No. Did you have programming? No. And you did for a couple of weeks and nobody came in, and so you decided to close. Well, yeah. No, that's not how you do it. You do it, you commit to doing it for 6 months, you advertise the heck out of it, and you have programming during that time. So, you know, you make things available when people can do it. And yes, you can find people who will work during those hours. You know, Walmart does it, McDonald's does it, lots of places do it. You have the library open. And this is a biggie. Libraries do not exist to safeguard our collection. What does that mean? It means that we don't chain our books to the tables anymore. You got to provide a little bit of safety and security, but you also got to provide services. And if you are denying people services on the assumption that they are going to steal your materials, then you're going about it wrong. And if you have to have fines in order to be able to make the books balance at the end of the year, then you need to cut somewhere else. Fines are retrogressive. They are so damaging to the library. Yeah, they bring in a little bit of money. No, they in no way make up for the incredibly bad PR, the cut in services, and the reduction in services to the people who need your services of what you get. You've got to get out of the idea that you have to safeguard every single book in the library, and that you got to put up these barriers to keep these terrible people from stealing your collections. And that's exactly what I was saying a second ago. Libraries do not exist to stop anyone from using our materials or resources. We are there for people to use our materials and resources. The fact that we got 100,000 books on the shelf is not good. You want the books out being used. You want the DVDs out being used. You want people sitting at your computers. Yeah, you'll lose some. It's a cost of doing business. Yeah, somebody will do something stupid on your computer. It's a cost of doing business. It's what you do. And if you're not doing it, then you're not doing your job. You're not doing the job of libraries. And you do not exist to promote the status quo. You exist to provide equal, equitable services to everybody, regardless of economic conditions, regardless of gender identity, regardless of sexual orientation, regardless of poverty level, regardless. Serve the people. Exactly. A stolen book means you chose well with selection. And you know what? Almost always, they make whole bunches of these books and you can buy another one. It's just amazing. Some people have so many books, they actually sell them. And again, the library has little or no right to act in loco parentis, or in place of the parent. I understand that. This is why it's a delicate balancing act. Do you allow people, how do you decide what a kid can check out? Who's responsible? If the parent doesn't sign for the card, the parent's not responsible. Well, probably the parent is responsible still. That's kind of immaterial if a kid's underage, but it's tougher to bring action against them. But you know what? You don't necessarily have to bring action against everybody who loses or steals or has a dog eat a book. Yes, maybe the kid's going to react badly in the library. Maybe you're going to have to kick them out. But if you kick them out before they come in, you avoid that problem, but you also avoid providing services to a lot of people who need it. So it's a delicate balancing act. It has to be determined locally. I'm not going to give too much advice on this because it's what you're comfortable in doing. But keep in mind, if you're not serving the people, if you're not serving the children, if you're not providing programming for the children, you're not doing your job. Library policies. And this is going to get into deep weeds here, and I'm going to probably try to get through some of it quickly. Policies and regulations that impose restrictions on library use. should only apply to those activities that materially interfere with the public's right to access the library facilities, the safety of users and staff, and the protection of library resource facilities. Don't have extraneous rules. Have the most narrowly tailored prohibitions or restrictions that you can possibly come up with. You know, if somebody has stolen a book, lost a book, whatever, and you're not going to let them check out another one, you know, in one book, I think that's probably pretty draconian, whatever. If you decide you're not going to let them check out another one, still let them use the computer, still let them come to programming, still let them take parts in arts and crafts. The things are unrelated. You know, if they can't act good in crafts, if they can't act good during a program, still let them to go to the children's area and check out books. Don't be overly broad in what you do. Don't favor the majority at the expense of individual rights or allow individual users' rights to supersede those of the library users. But the thing is, if what somebody's doing does not materially impact somebody else, then they should probably be allowed to do it. The court has ruled that if you, to give you the classic example, if you've got somebody who smells so bad that you can't stand to be around them, then other people can move. You don't kick them out of the library. The fact you don't smell good does not impact your right to use the library. If you have a kid who likes to sit and drive a car around on the floor and go boom, 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 let them. You should make sure your policies are based upon actual behavior and not upon arbitrary distinctions between individuals or classes of individuals. Never target specific users or groups based on an assumption or expectation. And that's often what people do with people who are living in poverty or who have difficulty proving a permanent address. You assume they're going to steal your materials. Maybe they are, but you're really discriminating against them when you decide that. You should not restrict access to the library by persons who merely inspire anger or annoyance in others. If you have somebody who comes in dressed in such a way it's going to inspire anger or annoyance in others, that's the problem with the anger, the others, not the person who's dressed that way. Employ a reasonable objective standard based on behavior, not on some subjective criteria. We're going to get nowhere near through all this, but I think this is going to be available. The PowerPoint's going to be available later. Provide a description of what's banned. Make sure that if you do have to restrict access somehow, make sure they have an alternative means for information in the library. If you totally ban somebody from the library, first off, a lifetime ban has virtually never been upheld in court. And that includes a child, an adult, or whatever. If you need to kick somebody out of the library, make sure it's time limited and make sure it's appropriate, and make sure that you limit it to appropriate materials. Make sure it addresses what they do. Also, enforce things even-handedly. Don't disfavor any person or group in an arbitrary or capricious manner. Requiring a parental signature can be a major barrier to a child's use of the library. Requiring proof of address can be a major barrier to a child's use of the library. Both those are, I think, true statements. They'd be difficult to refute. How you handle them is a local decision, but it's something you need to consider. You have a parent is liable for what a child does, regardless if they sign the little form or not. So keep that in mind before you make a parent sign for every card that goes out of the library. Requiring parental presence can be a major barrier to a child's use of the library. Requiring fines for overdue lost material can be a major barrier for a child's use of the library. We've been through this, and it's something you need to consider. Holding programming only during the day can be a major barrier to a child's use of the library. Parents work. Sometimes they work in the evening. Sometimes they work during the day. Majority of people still work during the day. Holding programs on evenings, weekends, holidays, it's a good idea. Holding programs only at the library can be a major barrier. Again, children do not necessarily have a way to the library. Public transportation does not necessarily exist in most parts of Kentucky. So it's something you need to consider. Have it in the field. Go out and do stuff. A reputation for reporting truancy can be a major barrier to a child's use in the library. There are libraries that if they see a child who should be in school, they will call the school and report them. Unless I am mistaken, that is not your job. If the truancy officer, if there is one, wants to come to the library, that's his job or her job. It's not your job. Charging fees for programming can be a major barrier to a child's use of the library. To back up just a second, if you've got a child who's being truant, what better place could they possibly be than the library? Think about it. If they got to be truant, if they can't get to school for some reason, or even don't want to go to school for some reason, where would you want them besides the library, especially if they're doing library stuff? Charging fees for programming can be a major barrier. Again, it's that whole economic barrier. If you got a lot of money, it's an inconvenience. If you got a little money, it's a problem. And the list goes on. Severing the underserved. The library should strive to improve services by promoting removal of all barriers to library and information services, particularly fees and overdue charges. Promoting publication, production, purchase, and readily accessible print and non-print materials. In other words, provide materials for everybody. Provide full, stable, and ongoing funding for existing legislative programs, support proactive library programs. Promote training opportunities for librarians, such as this one, in order to effectively teach for generation of public funding to upgrade library services to the underserved. Promote the incorporation of non-traditional programs and services into regular library budgets and types of libraries, rather than the tendency to support these projects solely with soft money, like private or federal grants. In other words, you shouldn't have to go out and beg money to do the summer reading program, especially if you're going to try to do everything for free. The library should fund that. If they can't, then you do what you got to do. But the library really should consider this as a priority, to promote the library summer reading program and to make sure nobody has to pay for take part of it, and to make sure it is in the community, not in the library, and that people can go to it regardless if they have transportation or not. Promote equity and funding adequate to library services for underserved populations in terms of materials, facilities, and equipment. Make sure everybody gets the funding they need to be able to do what they need to do. And support library resources by supporting local, state, and federal governments and the private sector to provide more adequate funding. Promoting increased public awareness through programs, promoting this determination of output measures through the encouragement of community needs assessments, find out what your community needs, and putting people who are underserved on your local board or advisory committee on service. If you have a teen advisory committee, have good people on there. Make them active. They're not just there to be pretty. They're not just there because so you can say you got a teen advisory board. Put people on there who actually will be active and who will say things that will help you. There was a library a few years ago that made a teen area in their library. They did not have any teen input on it, and it was terrible. And don't do that. And I'm not going to say who it was because it's immaterial. But the area they created was uncomfortable. It was so close to a service desk that you could have heard the least whisper at those teens who were undoubtedly planning something evil. The least whisper that they made. They had no privacy. They had straight back chairs. They had a table. It was terrible. Don't do that. Put teens on your board. Listen to what they say. Sensitize library staff to issues affecting underserved populations and eliminate attitudinal or other barriers. Promote networking and cooperation with the libraries and other agencies and organizations. Potential legal problems. These are some quotes. For the good of the common peace, these people's antisocial behavior cannot be accepted regardless of the socioeconomic circumstances that may cause such behavior. We are not social workers, we are librarians. A lot of libraries are getting social workers. It's something we're discussing here in Kentucky, and I think it's a great thing. The experience of large urban libraries suggests that procedures need to be developed for easing loiterers, sleepers, panhandlers, and verminous individuals out of the library. Yes, you want to kick anybody that smells bad or is verminous out of the library. No, you want to provide them services. You want to get them help if you can. You can refer people who need assistance, and that includes, if you have to, the parents of juveniles and even juveniles themselves are appropriate. Raunchy looking folks who tend to travel with most of the worldly possessions and trash bags or bedrolls, wear ragged clothes, blah, 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 may exhibit eccentric or antisocial behaviors, mental illness, alcoholism, substance abuse. These characteristics of the street person is appearance. And you know what? Street people have children. I once, back when I was an EMT, I used to be an EMT a long time ago. Once I was an EMT, I assisted a person whose child had broken their leg. They were afraid to take the child to the hospital. And so I actually probably broke every law in the world and set the kid's leg in the back of a car that they were living out of at the time. And they were incredibly grateful, to be honest with you, because the child needed to have assistance. It was just a fracture, as best I could tell. It didn't seem that bad. But it was not a good situation. So anyway, not only do homeless people have the same rights as others, but it's illegal to treat them differently. And libraries that may do so may be subject to lawsuits. Again, we're back on homeless people, but that's where we're talking about right at the moment, because that is an issue, being able to prove your address. You have to provide them service. You have to provide them the same service as other people. Patrons shall be engaged in activities associated with the use of public library while in the building. Patrons not engaged in reading, studying, or using library material shall be asked to leave the building. That is a real library policy. It's a real library policy you shouldn't have. Libraries are also a community center. They're also a safe place. Somebody described them one time as the one place you can go that nobody expects you to buy anything. And, that needs to be what the library needs to be. You need to be the place where people can go to and feel welcome. Patrons should respect the rights of other patrons and should not harass or annoy others through noisy or boisterous activities. By staring at another with the intent to annoy that person, by hauling another person about the building with the intent to annoy that person, by playing Walkmans or other audio equipment so that others can hear it, by singing or talking to oneself, or behavior which may reasonably result in the disturbance of other persons. Again, you got to measure this. How bad is it? Also, that just described a lot of your teen patrons, I would assume, from my experience in public libraries. But you gotta not let people be harassed. You gotta let people be able to utilize the resources of the library. But anything shy of that is a reasonable usage of the library, you really should tolerate, or maybe even encourage, depending on what it is. Libraries have changed a lot, and they need to continue to change. Patrons shall be permitted to enter the building without a shirt or other covering of the upper bodies, or without shoes or other footwear. Patrons whose bodily hygiene is so offensive as to constitute a nuisance to other persons shall be required to leave the building. Virtually none of this is enforceable. In fact, there have been some court rulings that say you can't even make them wear shoes because it's not really material whether they're wearing shoes or not, because the chances of injury are very low in most public libraries. So if you've got policies like this that you're applying to your patrons, to your children, to your young adults, to your teens, you need to take a look at them. Legal challenges. The courts have struck down all of these policies for failing tests of reasonableness, overbreadth, and vagueness. These policies are considered to not be reasonable, to be overly broad, and to be vague. You need to be careful of policies that violate the First Amendment. Policies have to pass strict scrutiny. In other words, it has to be a legitimate governmental interest for you to be able to do it, and it needs to contain a reasonable time, place, and manner restriction, which is narrowly tailored to serve a significant government interest. In other words, if you have a policy that says that if you have 2 overdue books, you can't come to you or your children can't come to programming, that will not pass strict scrutiny. There is no governmental interest to stop those children from attending programming. You can, if you have a policy that says if you got 2 books overdue, you can't use the computer, or 10 books, or 20 books, or if you've stolen a whole section and you want to stop them from using the computer, you probably can't do it. The two things are totally unrelated as far as the law is concerned, and there is no legitimate governmental interest to stopping those people from using the computer. If a policy is unconstitutionally overbroad, it reaches a substantial amount of constitutionally protected conduct. One thing that is inferred by the Supreme Court, the ability to speak infers within it that there is the ability for people to hear what you say. So even though there is no constitutional right to use a library, there is the constitutional right to receive information. And you are the government. You are a governmental entity. You're a governmental agency. And when you start restricting the people's right to access information, you are treading dangerously close to a constitutional challenge. If a policy is unconstitutionally vague, it may trap the innocent. People have to have fair warning that a person of ordinary intelligence would know what is prohibited. If it's vague without explicit standards, you can't do it because it has the possibility for it being arbitrary and discriminatory enforcement. And if a vague policy touches on First Amendment freedom, it shields freedom of expression and inhibits the exercise of First Amendment rights. The government is prohibited, that's you, prohibited from impinging upon the individual liberty in an arbitrary and discriminatory manner without cause, justification, or reason, and you may not penalize or afford different discriminatory treatment to a disfavored, disliked individual or class of individuals. The minute you make a policy that applies to one person, 10 people, or any given group in an unfavorable manner, you are treading in constitutional grounds. Again, this is not legal advice, but things you need to remember, things that are relatively commonly accepted. And remember, you are the government. Remember, equal enforcement, notice, and due process. Everybody, if you're going to have a policy, you need to follow those rules. You need to treat all patrons the same, and if a child can't sleep in the library, neither can the county judge executive. Everybody is the same. You must be sufficiently clear for a reasonable person would understand it. And remember, unwritten rules tend to lend themselves to a myriad of problems, none the least of which is the proof that the policy actually exists. If you got a policy, write it down. You have to have a process for appeal. If a parent wants to appeal the fact that you would not let the child check out things because they are homeless, they need to be able to do that. They need to be encouraged to do that. If your staff is allowed to make an initial determination, there has to be, again, an appeal to the director, to the library board, or eventually to circuit court. A written policy of appeal on all your policies should exist in all levels. And I'm running over. I'm sorry. You need to, when you're doing things, focus on the outcome of the person. Somebody may irritate you, their situation may be bad, but it doesn't matter. You have to focus on the outcome. Like I was escorted out of the library for no reason. I was not being allowed. There was no reason to take me out of the library. And it sounds like I'm angry about it. I'm angry because all the other people that may have happened to. There was no reason for that policy to exist. Focus your rules narrowly as possible to achieve your purpose. Make your rules understandable and concrete, and focus on being inclusive rather than exclusive. What can we do to allow this person the right of library use? And if you don't take anything else from this today, take that. Ask yourself, what can we do to allow the person the right of library use? It is a right. They did, whether they paid for it or not, is totally immaterial. You're a tax-supported institution. You need to be serving these people. It's in statute that you do. Possible problem policies. Do you require identification? Do you have to? Do you require a permanent address? Why? Do you require proper attire? What's that? Or do you require proof of pretty much anything? You got to be able to save, to protect your collection to some extent, but you have to be reasonable. Loss is a fact of life. Accept it. Consider waiving proof of identity for any non-consumable library use, a computer, in-house material use, programming, blah, blah, blah. Any of that has no effect, no threat of loss just because the person can't identify themselves. Provide alternative means of providing an address, a card, accept a bill, a letter from a landlord. Be creative. Do away with fines. Do away with fines. Do away with fines. Library fines do not increase material returns. You should not be depending upon them for a revenue stream. Unless you can define proper attire, which has virtually never been done to satisfaction of a court, consider removing such term from your patron behavior policy. Also remember that certain things happen because of ADA covered situations. If it's something as a medical disability under ADA and you discriminate against it, you have set yourself up for a federal action. The question, I've been told we are bound by contracts with our online resource vendors, Overdrive, etc., to verify address, etc., so we can be sure we serve only people that qualify for library cards in our county. Is that true? I have no idea. And if it is, you probably should find out what the requires as proof. Is this something that, for instance, can a homeless shelter be counted as proof of address? Can saying that you live under the overpass on 127 count as proof of address? Do you have to have written proof of address? What do you have to have? It's a thing you need to consider and something you need to talk to your vendors about. And you can approach them and tell them, this is a problem for us because it's not enabling us to serve some of our patrons. What can we do about it? Work with them. Don't be adversarial, but work with them to see what can be done. As a governmental agency, you must accommodate ADA issues. And if you don't do so, you can subject your library to legal action. This is something you need. All of this is things for you to talk about in your library. These are not be all and end all. I am not saying I'm solving your problems. Chances are I'm creating more of them. But if that's what I do, then so be it. Because these are things that need to be looked at. Just the fact we don't look at it doesn't mean it goes away. Final thoughts. Serving your public should be a major reason for the libraries to exist. People should be welcome in the library. People should feel safe in the library, should be treated with respect, should be given appropriate services, and should have appropriate boundaries set. That's children, adults, and everybody else. But your primary objective is service. And again, apply policies evenly, give notice, provide due process, and promote use. Promote use, promote use. Anything you can do within reason, you need to be doing to promote usage of your library. And make sure your policies are either understood and reasonable. If you can't answer the question, and who does this behavior hurt? Why do we have this policy? In a truthful and reasonable manner, you should reconsider the policy. You may have to present this explanation to a judge. So consider that and be ready to defend what you have done. And lastly, this is me. That's my phone number, and this is the end. If you have any questions, if I can be of assistance in any way, shoot me an email. I read email, hundreds of them every day. So I will be glad to try to assist you. If there's any question right now, I'll try to answer it, but I think we're well past time. And we already have a link to the slides. So, yeah. Well, if there's nothing else, I'll turn this back over to Amy.
Thank you, Terry. Thank you very, very much. Like I said before, it's an honor to work with you. So if you have questions and just can't remember what his email is, I'll hook you up. Happy to do that. If you want to have future conversations about this and how to implement and look at alternatives, I'm happy to sit and problem solve with you. I suspect Terry would as well. And that's one of the things we're here at KDLA for too. So thank you again for all being here. Go ahead and take a break. It's a shorter one. We start again at noon, and we just have a bit, and then there'll actually be an actual lunch break. Don't worry. But you're free to bring, of course, your snacks and drinks while you're watching. In room 1, we have Sally Dannenberg will be here, and she's going to tell us about a program from UK called Learn the Signs. Some of you might be familiar with it, but it's very useful information for us, and especially as we're dealing with the developmental milestones of children. Followed by at 12:15 by Bus to Business, which is an initiative that's being done throughout Kentucky, where people are, I'm drawing a blank on the word. Anyway, there's an agency within the government that is actually getting a bus available to schools and groups, including they were willing to even do it with as a library program, and taking kids to see different businesses to give them ways to dream and hope about possibilities that may really be intriguing to them. So they've gone to car locations, they've gone to electric firms, they've gone to power stations, they've that sort of thing. They'll take you around to different large and small businesses and tour and let the kids know what is out there. In room 2, Jill Norris will be there for Child Care Aware, and that is through PCAC. That's the Prevention of Child Abuse in Kentucky. And she'll, mixed it up. No, Child Care Aware is independent of that. The next one is in room 3, Prevent Child Abuse Kentucky. Emily Bandy will be there. Again, all of these things will be recorded so that you don't have to choose. Just jump into one of the rooms, sit back and enjoy. As per previously, I'll throw on some music that is, again, more oceanography or ocean-esque sounds for you to enjoy. And take a stretch. Get up, move about, jot down your thoughts. Anyway, you know what I mean. All right, see you at noon. So a whole whopping 5 minutes. Excellent.
Now the ship's really rocking. The friendly pirate ship is rocking on the sea, rocking on the sea, rocking on the sea. The friendly pirate ship is rocking on the sea. We're all getting tossed about. When the storm calms down, we'll sail the sea again. The sea will be our friend. We'll sail the sea again. When the storm calms down, we'll sail the sea again. We won't get tossed about. The friendly pirate ship is rocking on the sea, rocking on the sea, rocking on the sea. The friendly pirate ship is rocking on the sea. We're all getting tossed about. Ahoy there, me hearties! I'm Lester the Lobster from PEI. I'm an ugly little bug with beady little eyes, but I can tackle anything that comes to twice my size. I'm Lester the Lobster from PEI. Now, some people hold to the silly little notion that every single lobster in the big wide ocean is as green as can be until they're boiled. But I'm as red as Prince Edward Island soil. He's Lester the Lobster from PEI. He's an ugly little bug with beady little eyes, but he can tackle anything up to twice his size. He's Lester the Lobster from PEI. And a amazing crustacean, that's what I am explaining. The first